So, hello Mahesh. It's very nice to meet you today.
Hi, Veda. Hi. Thank you.
I'm I'm looking forward to, hearing about your experiences in theater and, especially with Border Crossing and Michael. So, to start off with, what's your name and where are you from?
Mm. My name is Mahesh Dattani, and where am I from? That's an interesting question. Ethnically, I'm Gujarati. My parents were from Gujarat, and but I grew up in Bangalore. I was born there and raised in Bangalore. And currently, I live in Mumbai. I've been in Mumbai for the past 20 years now.
Okay. And how old are you?
I'm 67.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
Um,
am I 67 or 68? 26. So I will be 68 this year in August.
right. And please describe yourself as you are right now.
I am a bespectacled 67-year-old cis man and Gujarati by birth, but I have no connections with Gujarat. And I consider myself a Bangalorean at heart because I grew up there. And I'm, what else did you want? Height. Yes, I'm 5 feet 9 inches and I weigh approximately 70 kilos. Do you want that in pounds? I've forgotten. Into
No, I
2.2.
think I
Uh,
think that's
17 to 2.2 would give you my weight in pounds.
and so getting into what we're going to be talking about today. Since it's all about theater, I'd love to hear about how you got into theater and plays in the first place.
Well, I was probably about 12 years old when I saw uh, my first play, and this was a Gujarati play in Bangalore. Now, ours was this was in the 60s, late 60s, and there was a very small Gujarati community in Bangalore. Bangalore, as you know, is predominantly South Indian. Um, and so, more than anything else, a play in our language was something that the entire community would look forward to. Some were interested in theater, and some were just interested in the sheer pleasure of seeing something in the language that they spoke at home in. So it was a terrific meeting point for my mom and my dad. They would meet their relatives and friends, and there was always this sort of excitement culturally. Um, I guess what excited me was that, in the foyer, people were busy socializing and fixing weddings and checking out to see who's a good, suitable boy for my girl and the other way around and stuff like that. And the third bell went off and people were still talking. And the organizers had to actually yell and say, please come in, the play is starting now, and all that. And the chatter continued as people reluctantly sort of went in and got their seats. But once the play began, there was this hushed silence. And especially in the play, it was a kind of who done it kind of thing. And at one point, very early in the play, a gun was passed around. And at the end of the first scene, the actor, she takes a gun, points it at the audience, and shoots at one of the audience members. Now, I saw this about almost 60 years ago, but I still remember in detail what the play was about. So it just stayed with me. And I guess if it could shut up 600 Gujaratis, then I think there was something very important going on. And I guess that was a love at first sight kind of thing. Of course, I started doing theater much later. but those were my first impressions.
Okay, so theater for you has your earliest like memory of theater is closely linked to how it's like building community.
Yeah.
That's nice. And when it comes to the kind of stuff that you direct or write, um, what would you say are your influences, or who are your influences rather?
Mhm. Well, again, I know it's very easy to blame my education, but most of the blame does lie there. Is that I studied in an English medium school run by, I think they were Catholics, I'm not sure, or Jesuits, whatever that is. Well, the point is that literature meant Shakespeare or Dickens, and poetry was Shelley and Wordsworth and things like that. So we really didn't study any Indian literature or poet till much later, and that was only when I opted for Hindi as a second language. That's when I was introduced to Kabir and Munshi Premchand and those uh, literary giants. So I guess a lot of my theater was influenced by what I read. And I remember the library had those vinyl records of old Vic productions of Shakespeare. So I had, you know, Twelfth Night and Julius Caesar, and so or John Gielgud sort of reciting sonnets. So it was all, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So it was fascinating. I fell in love with that, with the grandeur of how the language suddenly sort of got a lot of hot air. So that was, I guess, very exciting for me. And so my earliest memory of practicing theatre was joining this amateur theatre group in Bangalore called the Bangalore Little Theatre, which was, surprise, founded by an Englishman, David Horsborough. I never met him because he passed on by the time I joined, but there were lots of enthusiastic Bangaloreans running it. And I trained under some people and directed my first play for them. So, amongst the plays that I read, I was first fascinated by Edward Albee, the American playwright, especially with Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Um, and then at that time, I didn't understand it. But then after that, I read Strindberg's Dance of Death, which is what influenced Edward Albee. And suddenly, this whole thing of the conflict between man and woman uh, somehow sort of warmed my blood to writing. And so, to cut a long story short, I wrote Where There's a Will in 1985. I think that was the first play that I wrote. I directed plays before, very bad productions of various things like Greek. What I did Hippolytus, Euripides, Hippolytus very badly, and then I did other. I did an English playwright as well, Alan Ayckbourn, very sort of funny situational comedy and things. But by the time I got interested in writing, I was very keen to write something that spoke to me, and I wrote Where There's a Will, which is a comedy around a Gujarati family living in Bangalore. So that was, if you ask me, the question was, what are my influences? I would say Tennessee Williams, Edward Albee initially, and then later it was Vijay Tendulkar and Mahesh Kunchwar, both giants in modern Indian theatre, and to some extent Bertolt Brecht. because I did a workshop conducted by a German director, Professor Fritz Benewitz. Um, he was very passionate about Brecht, and Brecht became very popular amongst Indian theatre groups. I remember a lot of Kannada productions of the Caucasian Chalk Circle, and even Galileo was quite a popular play. Um, so I guess those were my early influences.
And so, I mean, given that the majority of your influences, at least the early ones, were like in the medium of English, um, I mean, is that the only language that you find yourself writing in?
Yeah, yeah, and that's where I would blame my education on that, because I feel that, especially my generation, we grew up thinking education meant education in English. So it was a bit of, and we all sort of were complicit in that. Your son speaks very good English. Oh, he writes in English. So there was this whole thing about English being a kind of uh, pass towards education. So I guess very soon I forgot Gujarati, because the only person I really spoke to in Gujarati was my mom. My sisters and I, we still speak to each other in English, and Kannada is something I I learned. I had it as a third language, and Hindi was my second language. So my Hindi was better than my Gujarati in many ways. But English was the language I was comfortable in, and I continue to write in English. Although I do attempt writing in Hindi at times, especially when it comes to screenplays and things. But it also needs um, a kind of revision, or I rely on other people to give me nuances or to help me say something a little better. But yes, I am, to answer your question, I am comfortable in writing in English.
All right. And now, just to switch courses slightly, uh, I'm very excited to hear about the first time you met Michael. So, could you tell us a little bit
Oh my
about
God.
that?
I know. I don't know whether it's a lesson in synchronicity, some kind of weird uh, spiritual connection. It sounds a little romantic, but that's what it seemed like. We've joked about things like his name being Michael and mine being Mahesh and things. Okay, let me not ramble on. We met actually in the U.S., in the United States, in Portland, Oregon. I had. Now, this was probably in the late 80s or early 90s. I can't remember. Um, I had a scholarship that took me to the US, and the good thing about the scholarship was that I could get tickets to plays in whatever region I was in, and I actually landed in Portland, Oregon, not as part of the scholarship, because um, a friend of mine, Alan Norse, had invited me, and a playwright friend of his, who became a friend of mine, Sharon Whitney, hosted me. I stayed with Sharon, and Sharon was very well connected with the theaters. So she told me, "Oh, there's this interesting take on Romeo and Juliet, where the Capulets are black and the Montagues are white, or the other way around, I forget." So I said, "Yeah, sounds interesting. I'd love to see it." And I did go, and it was a wonderful production. And I could see how uncomfortable it made audiences to view this. Even in the 80s, Portland, Oregon was pretty much a European dominated state. Maybe it still is. There were very, very few non Europeans there. And I was the token Indian walking down the street, so I was like a bit of an exotic bird there. So, but this production definitely made people feel uncomfortable, and I loved it. I just loved what it did to the audiences. And then Sharon said, "Would you like to meet the director?" I said, "Of course." And she introduced me to Michael. And I just happened to mention that, oh, I'm a playwright and I will be traveling to London. I'm going back to India via London, and I am staying over for a couple of weeks in London. And like all Indians, you just say, oh, it would be so nice to meet up there because you're in London. And he, being the Englishman, took it seriously and was waiting for me to call him when I'm in London, and I completely forgot about it. And weird. I walk into this playwrights conference um, somewhere, I forget where, but it wasn't in the West End, it was somewhere in a fringe area. And there's this Englishman waving at me from across the room. And I was wondering, is he waving at me or something? I thought maybe he's waving. And then he made eye contact and said, and then after the conference, he came up to me and saying, "Hello, we met in Portland, and why didn't you call me? I'd arranged a trip to Sussex for you to see my opera and stuff like that." And I thought, my God, he was actually expecting my call. Um, and I did say we'll connect, and he did give me his number. So, but here we were, and he said, "I'm very interested to know what you're doing." And I said, "I write plays, I direct, I have this small theater group in Bangalore." And so I gave him details, and I said, "I'm going to." So these were. Before the days of email and cell phones and things. So I didn't have my scripts, and at that time, my scripts were not published. So I promised him that I will send him my script. So as soon as I got back to India, I couriered my scripts to him. And within a week, he responded that he really liked Bravely Fought the Queen. And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful. We must have some kind of reciprocation. Why don't you come down to Bangalore and direct a play for my group?" And he said yes, and he offered possible dates and things. And I said, "Okay, what would you like to direct?" And he said, "Shakespeare." He said, "The Tempest." And I groaned because I grew up with this baggage with the kind of schooling I had, and I wanted to move away from anything remotely connected with English literature. But he said, Shakespeare goes, he wasn't just an Englishman, he was a playwright of world stature. And I agreed, although I didn't know much about Shakespeare, at least not as much as he did. And so I said, okay, let's look at it. And he was very excited about the transposition of The Tempest being a play about colonization and everything. And that's his pet subject, the colonization and the effect of it. So he was talking about Caliban being a slum dweller or a coolie or something, and Ariel being the spiritual, like Krishna or something, trapped by the colonizer. And it all just made sense, his vision. And I could add to it culturally, obviously. I knew a little bit more specifics about how we could transpose that. So you had Prospero as a kind of mix of a Brahmin and a colonizer, a European. And yes, Ariel was played by this wonderful actress. So we had a very feminine Ariel with Krishna. And so it all just made sense uh, somehow. And after the next year, we did Bravely Fought the Queen in London. We rehearsed in London, and we opened at the Leicester Haymarket Theatre. I forget which year. Well, 30 years, because that's how Border Crossings was formed, with Bravely Fought the Queen. So I guess it's 30 years. So just 26 minus 30. I don't know what that is. That's when we did Bravely for the Queen at the Leicester Haymarket Theatre. And then we moved to the BAC, the Battersea Arts Centre, just outside London. And it was amazing because we got very good reviews. We got Time Out gave it a very positive review, and I think the Guardian or some other paper gave it a nice review. And one thing led to another is that one of the radio drama commissioners from BBC came to see it, and he met me. I was outside. I used to smoke then, so I was standing outside smoking a cigarette. um, I think they call them fags in England at that time. Uh, Terrible word. But anyway, so he said, would you consider writing a radio play for the BBC? And I said, I've never written a radio play. And he said, well, I could send you books and I could send you tapes of so he gave me his visiting card. And I said, yes, yes, I'm here for another week and I'll call you. And obviously, I think he maybe was familiar with Indian culture. And he said, please do call me. And that was our parting shot. And I called him the next day. It was a working day. And sure enough, he invited me to a Bush House. And then that's how I wrote Do the Needful. And then I continued working with BBC radio drama for the next 10 years. So it's very interesting how one thing led to the other with border crossings, especially Michael, because I knew Michael first, and then border crossings came later.
Okay. So, I mean, your collaboration has spanned like 3 decades.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. That Tempest was a collaboration in every sense of the word, because I was helping. He was obviously in charge as the director. I wasn't directing it, but I could help him out with the setting, uh, and of course we didn't very locate it specifically in Bangalore. We sort of kept it pan Indian in many ways, and obviously when we were doing Bravely for the Queen in London, he asked me to co-direct with him. So I was giving him and the cast a lot of inputs on the script and meta text as to how I came about writing the play and stuff. So it was a very, very uh, free flowing collaboration. That doesn't mean that we agreed on everything. We strongly disagreed at places, which is part of the fun of collaborating. Apart from Michael, I can't think of very many other people I've collaborated with. I just feel that I'm more of a solo person. Uh, Maybe a part of me likes to be in charge, but with Michael, it was different. We even if we disagreed, we could understand each other perfectly. So I think that was a great collaboration. And then we continued with collaborations with orientations, reorientations in Shanghai, which was also very interesting.
So, first, I'd like to actually go into the Tempest a little bit. So, how did you and Michael come to see India and Shakespeare through the direction of this play?
Well, Michael came from the perspective of a European, of being a European colonizer as part of his legacy, right? Whereas I saw shades of the caste system in the play that you are looking, and of course these are who cares what the facts are, but the fact is that we did have migrations. uh, you could call Aryan migrations, or whoever came from outside of the Indian subcontinent, and changed things, changed how we worshipped, changed our sacred scriptures. Everything became very later became very Brahminical. Um, so that was something that interested me and excited me, that you had this magical power, almost like the power of the Vedas being used. Uh, so Michael then came up with some very interesting images when, like, for instance, when Prospero says, "Lie there, my art," he's obviously referring to the books that give him the wisdom to and power to colonize. And he wanted uh, the sacred thread to be placed there with the line, "Lie there, my art." So those were very interesting and very powerful images, I feel. And even the harpy and the gods that come, like we had Vanadevi and Bhudevi and stuff. We used a little bit of Bharatnatyam there, which was so. Um, it wasn't specifically located in. Now again, Indian is such a loose word, isn't it? I mean, sitting in Chennai, how different things are to me over here in Bombay. And they're both big cities, but still there are differences in cultures and things. So it was a bit of a kaleidoscope kind of thing of things. But for us, it was ultimately the play is about the relinquishing of power. That you know, the old saying, which I don't know whether I used it then, was that you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools, right? So it has to be like, even though Caliban has lines like, "Thou gavest me language, and I know how to curse." I forget the actual line, but the fact is, it's still the master's tools. So it's very interesting that the relinquishing of power has to come from the person who has the power. So it's still, in a way, uh, it's still political. It is still to do with power. So, and of course, I mean, these 30 years, things haven't changed that much. I mean, colonization has taken different forms. You have uh, other countries doing what England had done to many countries earlier. So it was, I feel, a little ahead of its time, the adaptation. I feel that I would love to revive it, because I think in today's world, it makes a lot of sense. If you look at Israel and Palestine, or Russia and the Ukraine, I mean, the decision to stop those wars lie with the people who have the power. It's you know Nobody else can decide, right? So I think it's a wonderful script to look at in 2026 as well. I know that Michael also adapted it in Fiji, where he met his wife. Right, so that's also an interesting story. I'm not connected to that, but
You mentioned like power, and you mentioned language, like with Caliban especially. So I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about what you learned specifically about language
mm,
through the process of adapting, Shakespeare to an Indian context.
yeah, it's very interesting that Michael insisted on us speaking Shakespeare the way we would speak Indian English. In fact, I remember there were some actors um who were trying to speak at whatever their concept of Shakespearean English would be. And Shakespeare, I believe Shakespeare never, I mean, his actors never spoke that way. And he said, he interrupted and said, "Are you putting on an accent?" And they said, "Yes, because it's Shakespeare." And he said, "No, speak the lines the way you would and mean them." And I thought that was a very interesting at that point. Now, of course, you see wonderful things with the National Theatre, where you see. Shakespeare very comfortably being owned by various languages and various rhythms and music and stuff. But at that time, we still had this hangover that Shakespeare has to be spoken in a particular way. So he was not so insistent on how the language be spoke, uh, but more on the meaning, that we understood what we were saying. And that helped us a great deal with breaking that barrier between Shakespearean language, because when you don't have a context to what he's saying, the language seems very alien. But when you do have a context, it's very easy to have a frame of reference from your own life experiences, and you will find it. So I thought that was a very interesting way to approach language, is to not approach it from a particular lens, to approach it as a vehicle for expression rather than the form of expression. So that helped a great deal. Because we had people from various backgrounds. Prakash Belawadi, who's a very well-known Kannada actor now, he played Caliban, and Kirtana Kumar at that time, she's Kirtana Reddy now. She played Ariel, and Ajit Bhede from Maharashtra played Prospero. So within this setup itself, and I think Miranda was Malika, a Bangalorean originally from Bihar. So you had this wonderful combination of cultures right there, and it was nice to see it all come through. And then later you had Tim Supple doing Midsummer Night's Dream, with people speaking in Malayalam and Tamil and English and everything, without altering the text. It was translated but not altered in that sense. So it was very, very interesting what Michael had done. I just felt it was a little ahead of its time.
Absolutely. And when I was reading about the play and I read about the incorporation of Bharatnatyam for the Stuart Court Mask, I was, I mean, the word border crossings really, get you see it in a different light when you read about something like this.
Yeah.
So, could you tell me a little bit more about the inspiration behind that?
Yeah. Well, I studied Bharatnatyam. I wasn't a Bharatnatyam dancer, but I studied it for 5 years. So for me, the go-to expression, especially for goddesses, even if they were not the Brahminical goddesses, the forest goddess, Vanadevi and Bhudevi, the goddess of earth, and uh, you, you know, my go-to was Bharatnatyam. I just imagined it in Bharatanatyam. So we managed to get dancers who were trained in Bharatanatyam, and so that became. Although it's a bit of a, now looking back on it, that was quite a contradiction, because there is a bit of colonization with Bharatanatyam as well, that it actually belonged to a different class of people completely, and it was appropriated by Brahmin dancers. Of course, at that time, that the politics were not so evident to me, and obviously not to Michael. But I think that brought in its own naivete, that we used a very classical, very uh, codified form to express something very elemental and raw.
Right. Yeah, I can I can totally see that. And so with the Tempest, I mean, you and Michael co-directed, co-produced, right? Did you?
Yeah, I didn't co-direct Tempest. It was his direction.
Okay.
Yeah, but I produced it under my group, and
Okay.
I was an informal cultural consultant on that.
And did you act?
Oh, yes, I forgot to mention. Yes, it was one of those rare occasions when I acted. I played Trinculo.
Okay.
And Adolfo and Trinculo were also very interesting characters. They were this very American kind of laid back, what he called Californian. Of course, it's completely incorrect nowadays because that's how even I learned levels of tension. That the most laid back one is called Californian. You don't do that now, it's considered very offensive. I don't know why. But so we were these very laid back sort of characters, and I had this boom box, and I was listening to Dancing Queen, ABBA, and all that. And so it was that we had these Bermuda shorts and floral shirts and things like that. And although in the play we had these underlings, this sort of deck hands who been, and there's this entire there's these beautiful scenes, as you know, between Trinculo Adolfo and Caliban, where you see the sort of subalterns from different cultures, and what is the power play there as well, that they feel that they have the power over Caliban, but he's actually using them to have a form a rebellion. So I thought those shades were very interesting, and I'm not much of an actor, so you know, acting, even while acting, I was sort of, oh, that's what this means. Oh, that's what he is doing there. So I was constantly thinking of those things. But it was great fun playing. I mean, a role like Tranquillo, you can have fun, and there are all these hidden sexual innuendos and stuff, which Michael loves to play up. So that was good too. Yeah.
Sounds like a really interesting and, exciting
Yeah.
experience for both
Yeah.
of you.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So, I mean, I want to ask about, over the 30 years in which you and Michael have known each other and worked with each other, what has been an especially important memory of yours about, like, border crossings?
Well, the most important memory is when we met in Bombay over Christmas, and he brought a Christmas cake from Marks and Spencer's, but given to him by his mom, right? And we had this other mutual friend of ours, John McRae, uh, and John McRae was someone I'd met earlier, and then I introduced him to Michael, and they became very good friends. So the three of us were in Bombay. Um, I can't remember what the occasion was, but I'd invited him to Bangalore, but I had some some work in Bombay. So I said, do take a stop over here. And so it was a wonderful Christmas, uh, eating Christmas cake from Marks and Spencer's. Uh, and those days, that was a big thing. And especially since I think his mom had packed it for him or given it to him. I don't know what. So that was a very beautiful memory. And I feel that there are other memories that we share, which somehow spill into theater. I don't see them as separate from one another. And we're not, what I really like about our artistic relationship is that it's not confined to a rehearsal room. um, it's very much outside. It's in pubs. We've been to English pubs when I visit London, and especially when we were rehearsing Bravely Fought the Queen in this very cold church room. And I hated them for doing that because I just can't stand the cold. And I was literally near the water, the radiator, and England at that time was had very bad heating. Like you had to be very close to the radiator to get any heat. And then we would go to, after rehearsals, go to the pub and have drinks. And it's very interesting. He would invite some of his actor friends. Like we saw, another important memory is that we saw The Wind in the Willows at the Young Vic. And the person playing Toad was a friend of his, a brilliant actor whom he's used quite often, though not in my plays. And we were there at the pub, and all this actor did was talk about British politics and the weather. And I remember Michael and I laughed and said, I mean, yes, we have the stereotype of the English as people who talk about the weather and about politics. But here it was that we spent an hour just doing that. And how interesting it was that it's a way of speaking, but not really speaking at all. And we Indians tend to do it as well when we ask about, oh, who's your relative or where you're from and things like that. You're really sort of not speaking. So I thought those were very interesting moments. And there was another one where his flatmate uh, was getting married, and his fiance was this lovely, very caring woman who was very particular about a lot of things. And there was this photographer who was pitching for the professional job of photographing at the wedding. And his friend had said, "Oh, we're trying to get rid of him, and we don't know how. And just answer the phone." And Michael just sort of picked up the phone and said, "Oh, you're calling about the wedding. Well, if I were you, I wouldn't bring it up." And he gave this very tragic tone and said, "Well, they're fighting it over, but it doesn't look like it's going to work." And he gave this very, very sort of grave tone. And that was the end of the photographer's calls. Those are really nice memories. I'm sure Michael has his own set of memories, but these were wonderful. Um, and I think it's as artists, we tend to think about the mechanics of doing theater because the mechanics are very, very important. But I think it's also very important, if not more important, that we as actors, directors, writers, that we are not confined to the room, and that we do think outside the room as well.
Right. So your time with Michael and Border Crossings has had good implications for you as a person and as an artist.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't see the two as very different, the person and the artist.
Right. And I mean, I want to go back to what you'd said about Bravely Fought the Queen, and I mean, actually talk a bit more about that.
Hmm.
And I mean, the play focuses on the Trivedi family, and touches on quite a few issues, and offers, I guess, a fresh perspective. I mean, offered, I mean, it was quite some time ago, but even then, like a contemporary look at the Indian family. So, how did it feel to go to London to work on this play and,
Yes.
perform it there?
Yeah. Well, it was very interesting because all the actors were British. They were Indians. I think Sadiqa is from Pakistan originally. I'm not sure, but British Asians is what they're called there.